So we're about to get started here, and I want to begin by introducing to everyone our moderator today, who is Miriam McNabb, Editor-in-Chief for Dronelife. And if I could, I'll turn it over to Miriam and let you take it away.
Thanks so much, Sean. Thank you for hosting us today. I am privileged to be leading this discussion on something that has emerged as one of the most challenging issues that's facing industry users today, which is cybersecurity. And today we're going to get insight on the topic from the perspective of a solutions provider, Teledyne FLIR, with the SIRAS drone platform, and a technology user with Drew here at Lone Star, Drew Smith, CEO of Lone Star Drones, an award-winning drone service provider. So, gentlemen, welcome, and thank you both for being here.
How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you.
Nice to be with you.
So upon reviewing questions that were submitted in advance of the session, many of them are covered in sort of a few broad themes, which we will address during our discussion. We will take as many additional questions as we have time for in the last 15 minutes or so of the webinar. So let's kick this off with kind of what we're talking about when we say cybersecurity. This is all about mitigating risk. So you're mitigating risk. Depending upon the industry that you're in, you have a greater or a lesser concern about mitigating that risk. There are all kinds of risks to consider with any new technology, especially when you're in a sensitive industry like energy. So Kelly, you've had a career in emerging technology for over 35 years. 12 of those were focused on the energy sector. Now you're the product manager of SIRAS. Why did Teledyne FLIR develop SIRAS, and what gap were they trying to fill?
Sure. So this will be my longest answer, but I think the background is good for everybody to hear. We were FLIR a few years ago and acquired by Teledyne, so we call ourselves Teledyne FLIR. That merger has gone great, by the way. As FLIR, we developed cameras for all sorts of things, including drones, and our number one partner in that space was DJI. And about 2019, FLIR decided, and certainly Teledyne has signed on to this as well, that the relationship with DJI just wasn't appropriate given who we are, who our customers are, our relationships with militaries and governments around the world. It was all driven by intellectual property concerns and cybersecurity. So we said, all right, well, we still sell our thermal cameras to Parrot and Skydio. It's on the X10, which is a great drone, Teal, and many others. But we wanted to participate in the market more, and we decided we really needed to have our own drone, something for the commercial space. We do make our Sky Ranger, which is a very sophisticated drone, very expensive, but amazing capabilities, and other things. But we wanted something for the commercial space, utilities, oil and gas, law enforcement, public safety. So we embarked on a large market research campaign, and we just asked people about everything. These companies, what do you think of them? What's good and bad? These technologies, what are your biggest concerns? One of the most consistent responses we got was around cybersecurity, which President Trump's executive order on drones, which was kind of adopted and mimicked by the state of Florida with their drone law and others, define the critical information is what we're trying to protect. And critical information gathered by a drone is the video, the pictures, the data, where is it at, the geo tagging and all that sort of thing, things that are collected by the drone. The United States has a key interest in protecting that from intellectual property standpoint primarily, but also a national security standpoint. So that was the number one thing we wanted SIRAS to have, which stands for Secure Infrared Aerial System. It also has a visible camera, but we're the infrared guys, right? So, and then we started layering in other features like no geofencing, because we heard really loud and clear from law enforcement they didn't want that. And we just designed this based on what customers wanted. And as we tackled the issue of cybersecurity, is like, well, can't we have a lot of code and features and it'll still connect to the internet, but we'll make it so no one can steal the data that's in there. And there was just no good solution. Large, sophisticated companies get hacked all the time. So the only way to make sure SIRAS was 100% secure, data safe, you just can't get at it, is to have it connect to nothing other than its own ground control station. And those communications are encrypted. There are penalties or trade-offs with that. There's a lot of really cool third-party software that doesn't run on SIRAS right now, although we are working on some workarounds for like Pix4D, and we'd love to be able to work with DroneSense. We love that stuff. So we'll get there. But out of the box, it was all about making sure that if you're inspecting a refinery, critical infrastructure, you've got some intellectual property, and you don't want anyone to have access to that, the data goes onto the SD card of SIRAS, and that's where it stays until you do something with it. And that's the best way to protect it. We did a survey recently. I think it was like 80% of everybody surveyed said they were concerned or very concerned about this topic of cybersecurity. So we think we hit it right with the design of this thing. And I promise I'll not give an answer that long for any other questions. That's the history.
I don't know. You kind of covered all of my questions in one. So Drew, you're in the field. Drew, you have a long career in drones, beginning with your service as an Army reconnaissance scout. So now you're flying missions. You're flying missions
in Michigan.
Energy mapping, survey. You have government clients. You have an international practice. What are the concerns that you hear from the field, from your clients, when it comes to cybersecurity? You show up on their site. What do they want?
Yeah. Starting about, a year or two ago, we started getting the random calls from prospective clients. And literally the first question they would ask, what drones are you flying? And oftentimes, if you told them, because initially before Teledyne FLIR introduced SIRAS, the backbone of the drone industry was the M210 and the M300 from DJI. Now, when you would say that you were flying something like an M210 or an M300, the conversation was very short, very, very quick. They were courteous, but they would say basically, thank you very much. We'll reach out to you. And then you never get a call again. About a year ago now, we were contacted by a 3-letter agency who had some very specific mission sets on one of their field offices, and it was basically a inspection of their facility and what we call parasite device inspection. Now, the conversation basically was, they picked up the phone, said, "Do you guys fly DJI?" We said at the time, because of meeting with Kelly and Teledyne FLIR, no, we fly the Teledyne FLIR SIRAS. Now that instantly went from about a 15-second conversation into a 10-minute conversation, into an hour-long conversation, into a lasting contract with this agency to do these inspections. So the concerns, and having done Energy Drone Robotics Summit, of course, that's a very big conference in Texas, because it brings a lot of the energy providers, both in the petroleum and infrastructure side, to the table, and basically gauges what their concerns, what their best practices are, and what their needs are in the drone industry. And overwhelmingly, the conversation lately has been data security. Now, coming from my perspective, my background is obviously in the Army as a reconnaissance scout, but it's also in the federal service as a information security. So The company, Lone Star Drones, has been founded on the idea of data security. In fact, our servers are kept in a SCIF environment, so basically completely offline. And this is why the conversations with Kelly were very productive initially. Was their solution was exactly what our solution is: cut them offline completely, because nothing can get to that if it's on its own little island. So our servers, our data processing servers, are kept completely off the grid. And we take that SD card, and we skiff in and skiff out of our facility and process the data that way. So from the side, the perspective of the industry and where it's going in the inspection arena, I think data security is going to be more and more and more important. We all have trade secrets that we're trying to keep a hold. We're trying, all of the intellectual property that's out there. We want to keep that secure. And when we know that the data is going to other places, it presents a concern for clients.
And I'd like to build on that, if I may. There's a really nice speech that FBI Director Christopher Wray, which is spelled W-R-A-Y, he gave at the Reagan Library in Simi Valley a while back. Very detailed. It's a pretty long talk, but there's a transcript easily found on the internet. Google it, about the intellectual property risks that we face with China. And President Biden met with President Xi yesterday, and it's like, hey, we want to compete and be buds, but there's certain behaviors that just have to stop. And so this is a great speech by Ray, because it's very specific. He talks about people that have been arrested, activities that they've uncovered. And, this isn't a partisan guy. He's Republican appointed. He's working for a Democratic administration. Some of this gets a little polarized, but he's just an objective law enforcement guy. He appeared on 60 Minutes a couple months ago with his counterparts from Canada, the UK, and Australia, and they all shared the same concern that there is a systematic program of intellectual property theft. In this speech in Simi Valley, he didn't specifically mention drones, but clearly drones are part of the data gathering process that China and others are using to not have to spend money on R&D. You just go, hey, look at what Chevron's got at their El Segundo refinery. That's a cool new ISOMEX. Let's just copy that. Why is that pipe going that way? Oh, good. They took a thermal picture. Now we know exactly what it's doing. That's the game that's going on here. And that's what SIRAS is designed to protect against.
Yeah,
and I want to say one other plug, since Drew mentioned the Energy Drone Conference, who is our host. That's the best show I go to, and I'm going next year. This is in Houston. Is it April? Well, it's in the spring. You get more bang for your buck out of that show as far as relationships and things that you learn and what's going on. So go to that show. It's the really good one, if not the best for our industry.
I think that you do make an excellent point about the bipartisan nature of this, right? Obviously, Trump's executive order has since been updated by President Biden. So this is just because that is a concern that a lot of people say, oh, it's just political. Unfortunately, it is a bipartisan issue. It is political, but that's sort of the point, is that this is geopolitical pressures at work here. So I want to go back and get very detailed about the data, because that was the primary concern when people submitted questions in advance. So you have said, the data is on the card. It doesn't link to anywhere. Let's get very specific about that. We have concerns about what happens in the cloud. There are a lot of drones on the market that go up and stream other places. There are also the issue of, where is your location data going? Is that streaming back to the person who provided your controller or your firmware, that kind of thing. So let's talk very specifically and explicitly about when you are performing a mission using SIRAS. You are gathering images, and those images are going directly to the card, not anywhere else, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Absolutely correct. Now, the downside of that is if you drop your drone, your SIRAS into the ocean, your data goes with it. But the upside is that data is in one place. So as long as you land your drone, take out your SD card, you can put it in your computer, put it in a secure server, it's going to stay secure. If you want to put it on the cloud, you can do that. But that's your decision. It's not the designer's decision. With SIRAS, you don't need to create an account. We don't know who has a SIRAS. You can go out and fly without geofencing. It's a very private experience designed for the professional commercial pilot and law enforcement.
And Drew, so from the perspective of the user experience, right? You've got your images on an SD card. How does that affect your workflows? Is that different than workflows that you had with DJI? How does this affect your day-to-day process?
Yeah, the way that you got the data off of the DJI systems was exactly the same. Everything is still SD card based. We kind of like it to stay that way. That way you have both the cloud and the redundancy of that saved to the SD card. The big difference is because, and obviously when we found out that SIRAS was as secure as it is, we were able to modify our workflow to not have to worry about things like making sure that all of the geolocation and analytics sharing that DJI has built into their system is turned off. So now we've got a system that basically, as long as you maintain the chain of custody on that SD card from the time you take it out of the drone till the time it goes into the server, and when we do work for something like a 3-letter agency, they want to be able to see what's on that SD card as well. So they'll obviously take it and they'll look at the data, make sure there's nothing super, secure there, and then we take it. We have a offline server that we do all the processing on. So the chain of custody is there. There's no question on where that data is going because it's stored on that SD card. And to Kelly's point, the drones are an incredibly capable device. There's a reason why they're being implemented in so many different sectors across the industries. It's because it can take better data with better fidelity and more complete than anything else that has come before it. And with that comes GPS data. It comes with the analytic data that the drone spits out. So, things like elevation, things like the GPS data, and obviously the data it's gathering. So with that complete package, if there was a nefarious character that wanted to steal that data, now you don't just have pictures. Now you've got where those pictures are located and all of the analytics that goes along with it. So data security in drones is probably far more important than any other device that has come before it.
So it's not just like taking something with a camera, in your hands, right? If someone had your images, there's actually more contextual data that goes along with it. And Drew, we had also other drone service providers who really wanted your insight on that chain of custody, how you're documenting that, and reassuring your clients that you have maintained a chain of custody, or in the case of law enforcement, had a sufficient chain of custody to ensure that the data can be used, as evidence if need be.
Yeah, and in a lot of ways, that can kind of be assured by the data itself. So with the modern operating systems that computers have, you can actually, there's an audit on how many times the file's been accessed, and it's EXIF data. It's been embedded in those files. So you can actually tell when the last time it was accessed, when the last time it was, and how many times it was accessed, where it was accessed. So we use that in some of the pieces of software that we use to do the data processing. And if we have, never happened before, but if someone were to access that data that we didn't know about, we would immediately know the moment that you opened it up on the server, because it would instantly tell you, you flew at this time and this date. If it's been accessed or modified in that pipeline between, you would know it immediately.
Okay, great. So Kelly, you mentioned geofencing. So you talk to your customers. I know from my conversations with you as a product manager that you designed, SIRAS was definitely designed based on sort of consumer feedback in the space. That's what you do, right? So talk about geofencing and how your decision on geofencing occurred. And then Drew, I'm going to ask you kind of if that changes anything for you about the way you do things in the field. So Kelly?
Well, it primarily came from law enforcement input and public safety, firefighters especially. You roll up to a scene. One of the things that people like is you can be in the air with SIRAS. I can get it up there in about a minute, most people about 2 minutes, but really quick. And it's an emergency, it's a fire, they need eyes on a situation, there's some kind of law enforcement activity. We've had a lot of feedback about stories about police officers using SIRAS and the thermal camera to find, the bad guy in the woods, basically. People that are fleeing, where they lose them, they go into a rural area, it's hard to follow, dogs aren't getting the job done. The drone can move at 40 miles an hour, it can go faster than a person can run. And countless stories, frankly, of being able to find these guys. So that's great. But, if you're near an airport or if you're near something that, there's a problem, we trust law enforcement to know what the rules are, to be professional. We're not going to tell them where they can and can't fly. We're not going to make them call the FAA and get permission. They've got a job to do. There's a bad guy out there that's harming society. And they have to be in the air quick and get their job done without any mumbo jumbo. So we heard really clear from them they didn't want geofencing. And the commercial pilots are doing inspections. There was some from them as well that they just don't like the feature. So we put all the responsibility on the pilot to know what they're doing. There will be a SIRAS version that'll come out in Europe, and they just have explicit rules that we're going to have to comply with, and there'll be geo-awareness and geofencing there. And that's just the way it is. But here in the United States, we put all the responsibility in the hands of the pilot. Be responsible, know what you're doing, and we're not going to spy on you. We're not going to make you create an account. We're not going to monitor what you do. We're putting a tool in your hand, just like a circular saw for Black & Decker. Use it responsibly. That's our message.
Drew, are you up for the responsibility? It's all on you now. Okay. So, are there any downsides to that for you as an operator? How does that change the user experience for you when you are using SIRAS commercially?
You have to do your homework. So the way we tell our new operators, when we field the SIRAS as well as when we sell the SIRAS, that's something we have to be very explicit about, that there is no geofencing and that they need to be aware and rely on, frankly, what they learned when they were studying and training to take the Part 107, which is your airspace restrictions and what that means. Now, the flip side, and to talk to what Kelly was saying, we had a situation at one point where there was a felony escape, and we were taking a SIRAS to a SWAT team to test and field, and this was a night operation. And we get a call basically within probably 5 minutes of arriving at their training facility, and they said something to the effect of, "Well, we're not going to be able to do our training, so we thank you guys for coming, but unfortunately, we've got this felon suspect to track, and we're all being called out to do that." And so, of course, my response was, "Well, we have a SIRAS in the back of the truck. We'd love to continue to basically field this during this mission." And they thought it was a great idea. So we brought the SIRAS out there, they put it up in the air. And to Kelly's point, they took, I think, 14 and a half minutes to get their drone up in the air, where SIRAS was up in the air in 45 seconds, something ridiculous like that. It was up in the air immediately. People weren't having to figure out the geofencing and unlock characteristics. So they were actually able to find this felon suspect using the SIRAS drone. And that was actually one of the very first missions that SIRAS has ever had in the law enforcement community, because that was actually one of the pre-production units. So that set the stage for how we can tell our clients and customers and in our sake the people who are actually doing the work for Lone Star Drone, they're able to get the drones into areas that otherwise they'd have to spend 15-20 minutes doing a geo unlock. Now again, we want to make sure and very clear that people know that geofencing is not available and isn't there to keep you restricted. Because at the flip side, you don't have to do any pre-mission work or workup to know where those airspace restrictions are. So we just ended up putting that into our pipeline of workflow. When we get a proposal, someone wants us to do a job, that's the first thing we do is we check airspace restrictions. We check for the TFRs on site. So everything is done before the mission starts, but it's far less than having to drudge through the mission unlock with a DJI drone.
Okay.
I can't resist but to put in a FLIR commercial. It's just who I am. So this story that Drew's telling, we're not showing pictures today, but what I love about it is that other drone that they were flying had a thermal camera, and eventually they both got up in the air. The other drone's thermal camera was the same resolution as SIRAS. It was 640 by 512, but the picture difference was just amazing. It's night and day how much better the FLIR is. It's our boson camera, and that's because of all the image processing that we do. It's not just the array, it's all the processing that we do to bring out the detail in these thermal pictures. And the number one bit of feedback we get on SIRAS is that's an amazing thermal camera. So I actually call SIRAS the FLIR camera that flies. I mean, that's really how you should think about it. And coming out next year, we're putting our Boson Plus on there. So it's going to get even better. End of commercial.
What we expect from Teledyne FLIR, best imaging. So I do want to say, as the questions have come in from people watching, there was one related to geofencing. So I want to address this right now. And this is from someone who says, regarding geofencing, in the event of a conflict between China and the US, could the DJI fleet potentially be grounded as a result of disruption of IP traffic, denial of support, etc.? I have to say, we live in a world of sanctions. If you look at sort of what happened in Russia, everybody in the construction industry woke up one day and could not use CAD. So, gentlemen,
I would say if there's a conflict between China and the United States, the least of our concerns is going to be what drones
industrial drones.
It'll be, where's the thyroid medication?
But yes, it is possible. Is that what we're
speak to that? Yeah. So in a theoretical world where countries went to odds, the DJI drones have to reach out to the mothership to basically unlock themselves when flying in a restricted airspace. And there is nothing saying that as a basically company wide that you could lock down all the drones.
Define the entire U.S. as restricted airspace.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
It would be easy for the federal government to do if they wanted to.
Okay. I think on the flip side of that, I don't think that would be the end result, because as we've said before, these are data gathering apparatuses. So if again a hostile country wanted to use drones to capture data, then again, that's completely possible because the data streams somewhere.
Right. Okay. So we have another one that has come up several times. So I wanted to make sure you did mention it briefly earlier, but are comms between SIRAS and the controller encrypted? Could you please address that?
Yeah, it is. I'd have to look up the specific code. There's a encryption protocol mentioned in the Florida drone law, and we comply with that. So, could someone who is extraordinarily sophisticated, if they knew Drew was going to be at a certain location at a certain time and they had a James Bond antenna, grab the thing, de-encrypt it. Sure, you can do that with anybody, but that's quite a lot of work and expense, and you'd have to know where Drew's going to be in order to pick off his signal. So in general, what we're saying is the communication's encrypted primarily so it doesn't get interfered with, and the data just goes to the SD card, and that's where it stays until you're ready to do something with it, like put it into FLIR Thermal Studio or FLIR Tools or some other processing software.
And on that, even if someone were to be on site and collect that data, the data stream between the drone and the ground control station, it is downsampled. So they're not going to be getting the full resolution photos. They're not going to be getting the full resolution thermals even, because again, it's downsampled when it comes through. So even if you were to get it, you wouldn't be able to get any useful information off of it, because it's going to be fuzzy when you pull it up on a computer anyway.
Yeah, the data literally goes from the payload here to the SD card, which is there. And this downsampled stream goes to the display screen of the controller so the pilot can see what he's looking at. But yeah, the goodies are on the drone.
Okay. We had several questions about U.S. government restrictions. So this is an issue that is not limited to industry. These were in the questions that we received prior to the webinar. This is an extremely hot topic in government. I write about this all the time. The United States Congress prohibited DoD from purchasing drones made in China back in 2019. Obviously, we've seen several pieces of legislation passed that prohibit or severely limit the purchase of drones manufactured by covered entities with government funds. We should clarify that the term covered entity is not fluid or fuzzy. It refers very specifically to the entity list published by the U.S. Bureau of Industry and Security. That is a list, and here I'm quoting from the website: activities sanctioned by the State Department and activities contrary to U.S. national security and or foreign policy interests. Versions of the American Security Drone Act, they have come up frequently. We had one in 2019. We've had ones in 2023. Those specifically call out technology manufactured in China. So there are federal restrictions on what you can do with federal funds, or if you work for a federal agency, or if you are a federal contractor. If you are a drone services provider working for a federal agency, there are restrictions. We are seeing some of those restrictions now sort of filter in some form or another down to the state level, right? So can you gentlemen please comment on that situation, starting with Kelly, and then we'll move to Drew? Sure.
So at a certain level, all this is pretty simple. If you don't connect to the internet, you're secure. If nothing is made in China, you're secure. One of the key features of SIRAS is its price. It's less than $10,000. So equivalent drones from domestic suppliers are $20,000 or more. There's some great drones out there, but they're really not affordable. They're really more military oriented, not affordable for local law enforcement, fire departments, people like Drew, inspection service providers, etc. So one of the ways we keep the price of SIRAS down is we make it in Taipei, Taiwan. We are partnered with a company there called Cortronics. We took one of their drones, which was kind of a prototype, and we spent the better part of a year upgrading it to our standards. We're still in the process of maturing it based on the feedback we get all the time from our users. There are some parts made in China, like the batteries. The problem with it starts really with President Trump's executive order. It was adopted by Florida, adopted by the Department of Interior. They give examples of what's okay to come from China from a component standpoint and what's not. So there are some components that are listed that are not smart. They have nothing to do with data, but they're listed. So we don't say we comply with the Florida law because there are some things that are listed in the Florida law that do come from China. And we say, look, they're not smart. They're not processing data. This thing connects to nothing. It's safe, but you customers, like a police department in Florida, will have to make your own decision around that. But it's made by Coretronics under our supervision. All the critical parts, all the things that touch the data come from Taipei. And then anything to do with the image pipeline, the cameras, the firmware that runs all that, that's all coming from California, where we are at FLIR. So we've got a statement when people are looking at SIRAS and they ask these questions. We've got a statement from our supplier, Coretronics, which is stamped by FLIR as well, saying these are the facts, this is the law, this is what it says, this is what SIRAS is. We think you're fine, but you make the decision.
And just to be abundantly clear, Taiwan is not a covered entity. It is a trade partner with the United States.
Yeah, and the Florida law goes beyond covered entity. That's kind of NDAA stuff. And just says, look, any component made by a company in China or a company outside of China that's owned by people who are connected to China. So this is where Autel would get into trouble. They make stuff in Bothell, Washington, but they're owned by Chinese folks. Really nice folks, I know them. And so they get into trouble because even though they're making things in the USA, they're a Chinese company. They're owned by Chinese nationals. So there's nothing in SIRAS that's owned by anybody outside of China who is connected to China. No parts other than, non-intelligent, non-data touching parts are coming from China. And by doing that and doing in Taipei, we're able to have a price point that makes this thing very competitive with Chinese drones, very affordable. It's $9,700 retail, not $30,000, which, like I said, there's some great drones. We know them really well. They've got our cameras on them, and they're out there hawking them to police departments are just like, we don't have money for this. So that price is a super important thing to me personally, because I know these cops. I talk to them every day. I know what their life is like, and keeping the price of SIRAS where it is or going lower is very much a priority for me so that departments can grow with this.
Okay. And Drew, when you're talking to your customers, you mentioned the 3-letter agency, but your customers in the energy sector or in other sensitive industries, what is their perspective on kind of the drone that you're flying? What their needs are for cybersecurity?
Yeah, absolutely. So the big thing obviously is they want to make sure that it's offline. There's workarounds with DJI that say that you can go offline. Again, you can't quantify that. You can't make sure. So going with something like SIRAS, obviously, that's the better alternative because we know that it can't go online. But that's one of the first questions they ask is, what's your data security procedures? How do you handle the data after it leaves our site? But basically that it's become the first and foremost question when we contact clients or they contact us is, what are you guys doing for data security? How's it working? And how can we ensure that our intellectual property isn't going to get out into the world? And there's procedures, there's whole write-ups by Department of Homeland Security's CISA group that cover things like data security, the drones, the robotics, and everything in between. And I would encourage anyone who is trying to shore up their data security, lean on the DHS CISA group for all of those write-ups and that type thing. So critical infrastructure is one of the things that the CISA group deals with. And that comes down to anything from a nuclear site to the power grid. It can cover things like sports venues, and that's a big one right now, is with the popularity of all these giant sporting events. If you're flying a drone over these sporting events, there's obviously privacy concerns, but there's safety concerns. So knowing that the drone is not connected to anything else, it's a far-flung possibility, but there is always a possibility with technology that it can be hacked, taken over, and controlled by someone else. So with the SIRAS, because it's completely local, that's not a threat. And in fact, the drone has to come completely down out of the air for you to sync up a different controller. There's not a remote handoff right now. So you don't have to be concerned about your drone being phished and taken. You don't have to be concerned about that data going anywhere else. So data security, intellectual property, privacy concerns for individuals, none of that's an issue. But again, it is becoming the question that is leading every conversation when it comes to drones and robotics in this industry.
Okay. And we've had a few questions come in about the DIU Blue SUAS list, NDA compliant and so forth. Just to be explicit about that, Kelly did address this issue. So it is not on the Blue SUAS list. It's important to recognize that the Blue SUAS list was originally conceived as a way of vetting very specific platforms for the Department of Defense. Right. So it has sort of expanded, but they have a very, very limited pipeline, which is why we're seeing other solutions, people looking for the list. I think when it comes to industry, certainly, those lists may be more useful for a government entity who's trying to work with the GSA's schedule, kind of a different thing.
Well, you're jumping up in price point considerably when you are going with the Blue UAS drones, or even those potential customers. You're talking government entities who are specifically trying to buy those drones, and the price point goes way up. But again, to be completely clear, we have flown for several of the agencies within the federal government, and all of them are completely satisfied with the data security and position that the SIRAS takes. The SIRAS isn't the only drone out there that meets those security requirements. But when we talk about it, again, this is where the idea of price point comes into play. As Kelly said, they're tens of thousands of dollars more expensive if you want to meet those Blue UAS restrictions. For us, again, we sell and use the SIRAS, and across the board, it has been nothing but successful when it comes to those clients who were looking to buy one and those who were looking to field one. So
Blue SUAS is really a way of sort of saying somebody else already did all that. Somebody else evaluated it for me. I don't have to think about it. It's right. Everybody has to evaluate their own own risks here. So before we get into some of these specific questions, Drew, we had several questions come in from drone service providers who are working in the field and really wanted to kind of tap your experience about the issues relative to security that service providers need to be aware of, and what new skills and procedures they should be thinking about to work with clients who have security concerns.
What I would probably say, documentation is everything. So for us, we spent years, basically. I mean, from the very time the company started until now, we're always refining the way we document our data security procedures and everything. But especially when, specifically speaking to service providers who are hoping to break into this industry, procedures and SOPs are going to be your best friend, because that's something that you can put into a PDF, and upon request, you can immediately send over to your prospective clients. And that's become incredibly valuable for us, because there have been several times where a drone service provider will show up on site, having said that they're super secure and everything, and it's very apparent that that service provider is not secure. So what we're able to do is we have a PDF package of all of our policies and procedures, all of our checklists, everything that goes into it, that we can immediately send off to the client and say, yep, we meet all of our requirements. These are the requirements our drone pilots are required to follow on site. If you don't see them following these procedures, let us know immediately. But here's a quick checklist that the client can go through, and they can basically check off all of the procedures that our own operators do. So basically, they're a third party eyes on during that operation. So I cannot reiterate enough that you've got to have it solidified, codified, and put into a good SOP so that you can speak to that when you're talking to your clients. I think that's probably the first and biggest step to getting more data secure when it comes to drone operations.
And again, this is all about risk mitigation. So you also need something that says that your client can hand to their risk department and say, this is what we're doing. So it's got it, documentation, everything.
And another level of that is the cybersecurity insurance. So it is a really big expense for our operation. It makes up the biggest portion of our insurance budget every year by a long shot. It's 4 times more expensive than our errors and omissions. It's about 5 times more expensive than our standard liability insurance for the operations. It's incredibly expensive. And again, but it represents going to that next level for your clients. And if you've taken the time and taken the expense, taken the ownership, and gotten that cybersecurity information security insurance, very few clients are going to have any issue in partnering with you.
Okay, thank you. All right, we're going to go to some questions here. We have a lot of questions. We'll answer the ones that come up the most and that we have the time for. Some of these are easy, so we're going to knock them off. Kelly, RID compliant, remote ID compliant, by law required by the FAA this year.
SIRAS is remote ID compliant.
Okay.
As of the original date of, I think it was September 15th. So they've now delayed that 6 months, but we're good.
They would clarify, the FAA has clarified this with me many times, that it is not a delay. It is their option to enforce, but they do want to see everybody working to the best of their abilities to be remote ID compliant, which if you are using SIRAS, you are.
Correct.
Okay. Another question you alluded to, what is the price? You want to talk
of SIRAS?
Of SIRAS.
$96.85.
96.85. I think it's 96.95. But Drew's given a $10
Let's not quibble. Okay.
I was watching the feed of questions coming in, and there was one about comparing versus other drones. So when I talk about other drones from other manufacturers, most other manufacturers have multiple models, different price points. So I'm always comparing against a drone from Autel or Skydio or DJI that has similar features, like similar resolution of the thermal camera, the visible camera, etc., similar flight times. So on that basis, apples to apples features wise, SIRAS is extraordinarily competitive and better price. Just for clarity.
When is SIRAS coming to Australia?
Well, we are in dialogue with a number of distributors there. There is electrical safety standards, mainly around the charger, that have to be dealt with. So our supplier is working on that. And when they get all the certifications that are, I think it's called CTIC. It's kind of like their version of UL. So let's just say 2024 is the answer to the question.
Okay. Another question relative to remote ID with law enforcement. Can it be deactivated by those in law enforcement if they have the clearance to turn off RID and ADSB by the FAA? So as far as I know, that hasn't happened yet. Is that correct? Or
Well, you cannot turn off SIRAS. If you open up the panel behind which the Bluetooth transmitter is and pull it off, SIRAS will say, "Great, now you can't fly." So if there was enough of a demand for that, we could make a version that allowed you to turn it off with a passcode. We'd have to get permission from the FAA to do that, so it's very complicated. The thing about remote ID is SIRAS does broadcast a signal, but that signal is not picked up by most cell phones. So chances are it's invisible anyway. If law enforcement wants to fly it around. It's just the way the FAA and the ASTM has designed all this stuff. So it works. If you got a phone that's compatible with Bluetooth and the right frequencies, you'll see the remote ID transmission, but not all phones will pick it up.
Okay. And we don't have a lot of options about that anyway, because it's the law.
I mean, it's technically possible, but it would be loops and loops with the FAA.
Right. So my understanding currently, although it is in discussion, is that there is no facility for law enforcement to turn off remote ID at this point in time.
Right.
And that is my understanding.
We've partnered with law enforcement across the country on hundreds of missions with the SIRAS and with other drones. That's never been a concern. Typically, if you're doing missions with a drone that requires that level of secrecy and security, again, we talk about the budgetary restraints. You're probably looking at a much higher price point.
The concern I've heard is if you've got some sort of drug processing operation and you roll up with a bunch of police cars, they see you coming, so they put everything away. So you roll up with a drone, and maybe you can survey what's going on. And so the concern is that the bad guys would have remote ID and be able to see, oh, there's a drone up there and the pilot's over there. So it's using remote ID against law enforcement is the concern.
Okay. Unrelated to data security, are there any future plans to provide an IR camera with interchangeable lenses for different standoff distances?
SIRAS has an interchangeable payload. So there's the payload. Oops. It comes off that easily. It goes on that easily. I can line it up. And yes, the plan is definitely for more payloads to come with different features.
Okay, so this is another question relative to that. Kelly, what about other accessories like spotlights, floodlights, and speakers?
So payload number 2 is our spotlight. Payload number 3 is our enhanced EO zoom. So we want to be able to read a license plate from 750 feet away, like our DJI and Skydio and other people do. This drone will read a license plate from about 200 feet away right now. So next generation payloads are in the works. And the reason why we made the payload interchangeable quickly is so we can offer other options with regard to camera features. But yes, a spotlight paired with a visible camera, really intense zoom levels, better and better thermal. Those are the things we typically get asked for in terms of payloads. That and LiDAR are the ones that we get asked for. And we're working on all of them but the LiDAR. The SIRAS won't lift a big LiDAR payload.
Okay.
But the rest it can do.
This is kind of This is an interesting one. Are drone service providers or device manufacturers checking to make sure connected cameras are not on a banned list, like the FCC banned list? So when we're talking about Teledyne FLIR, none of your cameras are on the FCC banned list. So not
Yeah,
an issue, right?
we make them ourselves, including the visible. We're thermal camera company, but we certainly make visible cameras as part of our systems as well. So yeah, we literally make all this stuff from scratch
Okay.
in California.
All
US.
right. And Drew, what do you see from the field? Are there payloads that you have to use something else for? Are you able to kind of cover everything with the thermal and the visual? What's on your wish list?
So there are missions that they fall outside what the SIRAS can do. Kelly mentioned LiDAR. Now, I would state that any LiDAR that could be lifted by something as small as a SIRAS or even an M30, probably not worth using. It's the noise is going to be too high. The accuracy is going to be utterly terrible. And that's coming from a company like my company. Basically, 80% of our revenue comes from survey and mapping, and we are the best in the industry when it comes to it. But we would never use SIRAS to lift one of our heavy LiDAR systems. Things that could be used with SIRAS is things like agricultural NDVI, where you need to do the
Multispectral.
Multispectral type stuff, and that's literally just a filter that goes on to the sensor of any other visual camera. So that's very easy to do. But we typically on something like that, we're still using some of our custom in-house engineered drones. So
and Drew,
yeah,
you recently used SIRAS to do a pretty large solar farm, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we to the point of some of the more specific missions that we've had for SIRAS. We recently did a solar farm that we were able to plug in the mapping. It was the mapping on SIRAS is a work in progress, but you can do waypoint mapping with SIRAS if you're willing to set up the pattern. Now we have a spreadsheet that we've developed that basically allows us to know how far to space those lines to get our correct overlap and everything. But we were able to do it just fine. And part of that was, one, the customer was very, very critical of their data security. But two, we want to field the SIRAS in as many ways as we possibly can to make sure that we can speak to that when our customers come to us wanting to buy one. But we've done everything from roof inspections, so the moisture detection. We've done solar. We've done. I'm not sure whether we have placed one of the filters for NDVI yet, but that's kind of on our horizon list. But we've done parasite device detection with SIRAS for some of the entities we deal with. Some real fun niche stuff that kind of spans the spectrum of drone operations.
What was the megawatts of the solar plant?
It was big. I'd have to get back to you on that one. I don't remember what the exact megawatt was. It was, so we typically just go by acreage because of the different flight times and battery times. And I think it was a 2,000 acre site. So it was big.
Yeah. A couple hundred megawatts at least.
Yeah.
So we're at the end of our hour, which went by very, very quickly. So each of you, 10 seconds, the takeaways about cybersecurity and drone use. Kelly, and then Drew. Drew, I keep wanting to say drone.
That's good too.
SIRAS is 100% data secure. Don't buy it sight unseen. Connect with the dealer. Go fly it yourself. You're going to love it, and you'll buy it.
Drew.
10 seconds. If you're wanting to ensure data security in your day-to-day operations, you've got to start coming up with policies and procedures. The drone industry as a whole has been kind of a wild west of procedures in the past, and I think that level of mission is going to be going the way of the dodo, and we need to have much more official style operations that take into account things like data security and operational security.
Great. Thank you, everyone.